This video is brought to you by our own Meta. Thank you so much for donating. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.
Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to this video on creating a tower defense game in Unity. Today we'll be making a game over screen. So whenever we run out of lives, we'll have this cool UI that animates onto the screen and displays the amount of waves we were able to survive through, along with a retry button and a menu button. And we haven't yet created a main menu, but it's definitely on the roadmap. So we'll just go ahead and add this button now, and then we can link it up to the menu at a later point. Also, if you think that I sound a bit weird, that is because I'm currently sick. It's nothing serious, but it is definitely annoying. And it might have an effect on my voice. And also, I will have to push the live stream from this month's live stream onto the beginning of next month because of this. And yeah. So I will be live streaming, hopefully, if everything goes well, on November the 2nd, which is a Wednesday. So you can reserve that date if you want to join in on it. And yeah, that was pretty much all I needed to say. So let's just jump right into it. So as you can see, I'm here in Unity. And what I want to start with is kind of sketching out the UI. So let's start by going to our overlay canvas, because this is going to be overlaid on top of the screen, and creating an entirely new object. Let's just make this an empty object, in fact, and let's stretch this to fit the entire screen. And this one is going to be our game over UI. Then we can right click on that, go to UI and select panel. And again, we want to stretch this to the entire screen. We want to remove the source image to make this completely square and get rid of the roundings. And then we can find some cool background color here. So I want to make this pretty dark, and I wanted to try out kind of a purple looking color without making this too girly. I think that could actually be pretty cool. So something like this, just to kind of dim everything down, and then we can up the alpha on this. So let's actually adjust the color again now that we've done that. And I think something like this is fairly decent as a backdrop. What I recommend whenever doing these kind of game over menus and stuff is going into Photoshop and just going crazy if you know how to do 2D design to make a cool looking game over screen. But if that's not something that you want to spend time on, if you think that's too difficult, you can just do this inside of Unity as I'm doing here. So this is going to be our background. And then we have a UI element, which is going to be a text object. And this is just going to say game over at the top of the screen here. So let's just, actually, let's just anchor everything to the center, but let's then move this up and kind of size it up here. And let's change this to center and center. And let's make this a font size of something like 100. And we're going to make this say game over. And of course, we need to scale this out in order for this to be displayed on the screen. And this is maybe just a tad too big. So let's go 85 or something. Let's also change the font to Roboto Black and change the color here to some completely white color. I actually kind of like the look of this, but I think we don't even need it to be this heavy on the font. I think something like a Roboto medium is actually going to be great. And then we'll put whatever text we decide to show here really in the center and make it really bold to emphasize it. So this looks pretty good. And then what we can do is maybe just add some kind of shadow to this. So let's add a shadow, and we can maybe make this 2 by -2. And you could just make this black, or we could go completely crazy and make it red. But I think that we are again going to do that to our center element here. So this is fine, and we can call this our game over text, or you could just call it something like title. And then we can duplicate this, and actually let's just make this fit the screen. It just looks better that way. Let's duplicate this and move it down. And one thing that I wanted to do is right now, if we maximize the game view, you will see that the text doesn't stretch with it. In order to easily make it stretch together with our game view, we can go into our overlay canvas. We can find the canvas scaler and change this to scale with screen size. And if we then bump this over to scale with the height, we actually get a pretty nice looking effect here, especially for the icons down here, which before just kind of disappeared in the UI. But now that they stretch with it, things are looking pretty good. So let's just keep that. So our second game over text here is not going to say game over. This is going to be a number, and this is going to be the amount of rounds we have survived. So let's just now set this to like a huge number, 125 for example. Let's make the font size even bigger. Let's do 120, and let's change the font here to Roboto Black. Let's just try that, and we can always change it later. And we need to give this plenty of space, and this is going to be our rounds. And then we actually, let's wrap this entire thing into an empty object. So let's create an empty object here, do something like this, stretch it out there, and let's call this our rounds survived. And under that we are going to have our rounds, and let's duplicate that, and this is going to be our text that kind of explains what this is. And that is just going to say something, it's going to be a lot smaller, something like 20, and it's just going to say rounds survived. Or waves, or whatever you want to call this. I'm just going to say rounds. And we can stretch this down, put that somewhere around there, just where you think it looks nice. The 1 is always kind of annoying when lining up elements, so let's just put a 25 here, and you can see that that is indeed centered. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. What I want to do is kind of change the font here to something more light. I think Roboto Light or even Roboto Thin looks really good here, especially if we remove the shadow. That looks pretty good. And we can maybe make this a font size of 25 instead. That's fine. And let's take the rounds here and let's make this shadow completely apparent. So with the alpha of 255, and then let's make that some reddish color. That looks pretty good. We can try maybe making it more purple. This gives a pretty fun look. I think we should definitely have something like this in here, and it's definitely gonna need some tweaking, but I actually kind of like the look of this. It's a bit girly, but we can survive that. We are men. So all right, of course there can be girls out there as well. I didn't mean to offend, apologize. So let's now drag this up a bit, and in order to do that, let's just go like that and go like this to center it. There we go. We don't need to spend any more time on that whatsoever. So drag down the game over, and then we can make a few buttons. So let's right click on the game over here, go to UI, and then button. And we can drag this down, and we can scale it up a lot. I want these buttons to be really big. And okay, maybe not that big. We can make it just tiny bit. Something like this. It's always hard for me to just let it go and let you guys do this on your own. So we're going to call this one the retry. And let's first off change the text here. So retry with capital letters. Let's change this to something like, I don't know, Roboto medium. Perhaps we can also bump up the font size quite a bit. Actually, it's fun to kind of sometimes make this font size super big and just see what happens. We can just try out this look. Actually, I don't like that. We can also maybe even get rid of the image and just have the retry as text, but I actually kind of like the image in there. So again, just play around with this on your own. So I'm going to bump this down to something like 40. I think that's a pretty good size. And we can change the font color here to kind of the background color. Just color pick this color over here. And I actually think that looks pretty nice. And we could even add a shadow to this as well, but I don't think it's needed really. We could also get rid of the UI sprite to make it totally square. But I even like that it's round a bit. I don't know. Actually, let's make it square. I think that's even better. So this is going to be our retry button, and we can just center this, kinda. There we go. And then duplicate it and move this one over. Something like that. And you can of course be more precise by typing in the units up here. And this is going to be our menu button. So we're going to go menu there, and we're going to change the text here to menu. Awesome. So I actually think this menu looks kind of decent and is definitely usable in our game. So what we can do now is actually implement this. So as soon as I'm done moving around some of these elements, there we go. what we'll do is create a script on the game over itself. So let's go in here and create a game over script that sits on the game over object, and we'll populate this with stuff in just a moment. But the first thing that we really want to do is enable and disable this object as the game continues. So we'll start with it being disabled. So we'll just disable it right now. And then as soon as the game ends, we'll just have our game master, because this is the one that ends the games. We'll have him just enable that object. And then on the object here, on the object itself, we'll have the game over script here then taking care of finding the correct amount of rounds. And if you want to do other stuff, such as linking up the buttons, or you could do crazy animations, all of that we'll have a look at. But we'll have all of that happen just when the game object is enabled. So this way, our game over script doesn't have to communicate to our game master script, and everything is a lot more simple. So let's find our game manager script here. Open that up in Visual Studio and have a look at what is going on. So it's opening up on my secondary monitor, and I'll just drag it over here. So this is our game manager as it looks right now. So the first thing is, of course, we need a reference to our UI element. So let's create a public game object. And this is going to be our game over UI. And all we then do is whenever we end the game, we can remove the debug.log statement here. We simply go game over UI. Whoops, not game over. Game over UI dot set active. And we set that to true. So we simply enable it. And that's all we need to do inside of our end game. It's really, really simple. So if we then jump into Unity, find our game manager and drag our game over UI object into that, and then hit play, you will notice that when we die, and of course we have to wait until we die here again, ignore these errors, they don't matter. What we can do is actually just start out with a amount of lives of 0, meaning that on the first frame we play the game, we'll just die. So let's just try that. So we'll hit play, and we should see that the game over menu screen just pops up. So that's awesome. So now that we know that this is working, let's actually just implement a quick way for us to test this without having it pop up in the very beginning of the game. To do that, let's set our start lives back to 1. Let's put an if statement in here saying if input.get key down. And the key we want to look for is the E key for end. And then we simply do end game. So this is just a quick temporary shortcut for allowing us to quickly end the game. So now let's go back, hit play, and hit E here, and you can see that ends our game over, or that pops up our game over screen and ends the game. The game is still running in the background, and I actually kind of like the fact that the enemies keep moving and the timer keeps going, and all of the turrets keep shooting. But what I really don't like is the fact that we can still move around the camera. I think all of the player's controls should definitely be just disabled once this game over screen pops up. So in order to do this, let's expose this variable right here. Because if all of the other scripts can actually just connect to the game manager to find out if the game has ended, it's very easy to implement on those scripts some kind of functionality that just switches them off as soon as that happens. So let's turn this into a public static bool. And let's also rename this to game is over. Something like that. Again, quick renaming with Control RR. Yeah, so now we can use this inside of our main camera and camera controller. So in here, inside the update method, we'll just write a if game over or game manager dot game is over. So in case the game is over, we want to disable this component. So this dot enabled equals false. And you don't even need to write this here, but it makes things more explicit. And then we simply return out of this update loop. So now when we hit play and we end the game, so let me press E, you can see that we can no longer move around the camera. So one thing we have to be careful with when doing it this way is that right now inside of our game manager, the game is over variable is static, and static variables carry on from one scene to another. That means that if we were to now reset the game, our game is over would be false the first time, and then we end the game and we restart the scene, and then game is over would be equal to true. So we need to set it back to false. This here only sets it to false at the very start of the game, not when we restart the scene. So we just need to remove this, create a start method which is called every time we load a new scene, and then we just set game is over equal to false in there. So at the beginning of each scene, the game is not over. Just a quick little fix there, and something that can be really annoying to deal with if you don't know this about static variables. But now you do, so that's awesome. So now that we fixed this, what do we want to do? Well, we definitely want to have our rounds survived here change depending on, well, the amount of rounds that the player has survived. In order to do this, we need to keep track of that. So let's go into our game master and add that into our player stats. We'll just go in here, we'll make a public integer, and this is going to be the rounds. And in the start method again, we'll just set rounds equal to 0. Again, we don't do this here because then when restarting, our rounds won't be reset. So we set that inside of the start method. Then what we can do is find our wave spawner, where we take care of spawning the different waves. And when we spawn a new wave, you can see we increase the wave index, which is a private variable. And we'll just go ahead and increase the rounds as well. So we could just go player stats dot rounds. And it's not appearing for some reason. Public int rounds. Oh, we need to make this static, of course. Public static int. So player stats dot rounds plus plus. So we'll just increase it there. And now we should see that happening. So we can't actually see the rounds in here because it's static, but we should it should increase. And one way, of course, that we can check this out is just by making our rounds survived actually update. So let's now create some functionality inside of our game over. What we need here is first off a reference to the text object. So let's do a Unity engine.ui include up here. Let's use that namespace. And let's do a public text variable. And this is going to store our rounds text. And we can just close that off. Then when this object is enabled, whenever the game is done, so void on enable is called whenever the object is enabled. It's pretty much the same as start, except it's called every time a game object gets enabled, and not only in the beginning of the game. And then we can go in here and say rounds text dot text equals player stats dot, and then we can go rounds. And we of course need to convert this to a string, so we'll do a .toString right afterwards. Awesome. So I believe that is all we needed to do. So now in our game over, we should see a rounds text appear, and we'll simply drag in our rounds there. Remember to do the rounds object, not the text object, which is the round survived, and this is the actual rounds, whatever. Just be careful with your naming. Mine is not totally clear here. So let's now do a play, and we'll wait a second here. So now it spawned one enemy. Let's wait for it to spawn one more, and that should put us on a total of 2 rounds survived. And if you now hit E, you can see that it says game over, 2 rounds survived. And of course, right now you can't help but survive at least a few rounds. One thing you could do is keep track of what enemies are associated with what round and whether or not you've actually killed those enemies, but I think that would be overly complicated. At the moment, if you don't do a thing, you should be able to survive about 3 rounds. That's alright. So you can see here how many rounds we've survived, and we are now able to press the different buttons. However, nothing happens when we press these buttons. And again, go away iCloud. So let's actually sync those up to the script. So in order to do this, we'll make 2 public methods inside of our script. We'll make one called retry, and we'll make another one called menu. Inside of our retry method, we'll go and just reload the level. So in order to reload the level, we'll be using up here Unity Engine.scene management. We need to include this whenever we want to do anything with scenes, including loading a new level, which is mostly what you use it for. Then we go scene manager dot load scene, and this takes in either a build index, and the build index I will show you what it means. So if we go up here to File, Build Settings, you can see here that we have to include all of the different scenes that we want to have in our builds. So in our case, we need to drag in the main scene. And each scene is associated with an index, which is here. So our main scene currently sits at 0. I don't know if you can add multiple scenes, you cannot. But if we were to create a new scene or just duplicate the main scene here and add it in there, you can see that we can change the order of these in order to change the build index. For now, we only have one scene in here. One thing you can also load it by, so if in case here we wanted to load our main scene, we would just go 0. Or we could go main scene. We can also use the name. You can see here, as long as it's totally accurate, you can use the name. But in case we change the name of the main scene, this is not a good way to do it. And if we add more scenes that are before this one, well then the build index is going to change as well. So instead we get the currently active scene and use the build index of that to load the scene. So in order to get the currently active scene, we go scene manager dot get active scene. And then we need to use the build index or name of that scene. In our case, we'll just use the build index. And we'll close that off. So that is going to restart the currently loaded scene. And this is a very generic piece of code because you can use it anywhere, no matter the scene, to restart the level. Awesome. And then in the menu here, what we'll do is just put in a debug.log saying go to menu. There we go. And we'll definitely change this at a later point, of course. So now we should be able to go in and test this out. And one thing that I just wanted to do is select the retry and menu and just change the highlight color just to make it a bit more visible when highlighting the buttons. So now when we hit play, we wait for a round here. We hit E, the game is over. We can hit menu and it should say, oh, of course. One thing that we also need to do is actually hook this up. So if we go under our retry, under our on-click event, we need to hit plus. We need to drag in our game over object, go under the game over script, go under retry. And the same thing with our menu, add an on-click event, drag in our game over, go under game over, and select the menu function. Awesome. And the last thing concerning the UI here is I want to disable navigation because we're using a mouse. So now we can hit play and wait for a round, hit E, you can see it pops up, you can see we have nice highlighting. If we hit menu, it says go to menu, and if we hit retry, it restarts the level. One small issue here is you can see there's a problem with the lighting whenever we restart the level, and this is just a very simple Unity specific thing, and that is with the new lighting system, whenever it reloads the scene, sometimes it doesn't have time to calculate the lighting, and so it just starts the scene without any lighting in it. In order to disable this, we simply remove auto from down here and hit build, and this will build all of the light settings and save it. And now when we hit play and do the exact same thing here, so just hit retry, you can see the lighting is okay. That also means that if you want to change the lighting in your scene, you're going to need to put it back to auto while figuring things out, disable it and hit build. So that's kind of annoying, but it is an easy fix to an easy problem. Alright, so that was pretty much all the core functionality that I wanted to show you how to create in this video. However, I still want to spice things up a bit with some animation. So let's just very quickly create that. So let's find our game over object and enable this. And what I want to do is animate each element separately in order to get a cool looking animation. If we just have it all fade in, it looks very generic. So what we'll do is just go to our game over here and create a new animation. Go under the animation folder and let's save this as, well, just game over. We could also do something more specific, but this is going to be fine. Then we find our background here. We add a new component and this is going to be the canvas group. And this allows us to simply change the alpha without messing around with the color. Then we go forward, let's say to 30 milliseconds. Wait, what? Half a second. And then we set the alpha to 0. And then we simply flip these keyframes. So there we go, so that it starts off at 0 and then slowly animates in. Then we find our game over text here. And I want this to kind of come down and at the same time fade in. So again, we'll add a component here called the canvas group. We'll set the alpha to, and let's do this at another point. So let's do it here. Set the alpha to 0. And we'll also move this up a bit. And again, we can flip these around. So this is going to start here and it's going to end over here. So let's see how this looks. So it slowly fades in and the game over pops up. I think it's a bit too slow. So we'll just have a go at moving everything over a bit. I actually like that a lot. So we'll just stay with that. And then the next thing is, of course, our round survived. So this is where we'll put in a canvas group again. And I want this to kind of scale from being really large and then zoom in. And at the same time, we want it to fade in. So again, the canvas group here, we'll set the alpha to 0 and we'll set the scale to something like 1.2 on all of the different axes. And then again, we flip this. So flip it around and kind of move it over. It's nice to get the different animations overlaying a little bit, or else it will seem really robotic and not really cool. So let's hit play. And I really like the look of that. And then the last thing that I want to do is just kind of have our buttons pop up. So we'll take our retry button here and we'll set the scale to 0.9 and 0.9. Even 0.8 is going to look pretty good, I think. 0.8. And we'll also add a canvas group to this. And set the alpha, of course, to the, you guessed it, 0. And we'll have this animate on as well. There we go. And we'll do the same thing with our menu. So again, add a canvas group, set the alpha to 0, set the scale to 0.8 and 0.8, and move things over. And we'll just line it up with the retry button and then offset it. Something like that. Even or offset it even more and hit play. So I think this gives a really cool kind of organic looking animation, and I definitely think it looks really nice. So the last thing that I want to do is just select all of these different keyframes, go under curves, right click and select flat for all of them. Well, I want to do this for all of them, so let's just select all of them. Again, let's try this out. Hit flat. There we go. So hit F to focus it on this and we'll just see what that looks. Okay, so now they're all flat. So that will just kind of smooth out the animation. So let's try that one more time. Yeah. Awesome. That's really great. So let's now actually have this play whenever the game over object starts, and it should do that right away. But right now it's looping. So let's go under our animation here, find our game over animation, not the controller. And let's just set loop time to, well, disabled. So it won't loop at all. This way, when we go in and play the game, hit play here and wait and hit E. You can see that it slowly pops up and looks super cool. And if we now go into our game master and just clean up our game manager and clean up our temporary testing code here, hit save. Now the game should be working just the way we wanted it to. So I'm just going to have the game play in the background here while we do the outro. And you can see that all of our elements are actually coming together. And this is now not a very challenging game, but it is a game. It has an end state. It doesn't have necessarily a win scenario, but because there is a score, the player has something to strive towards. He has multiple options, both in which turrets he chooses and where he places them. And yeah, we have enemies that vary in difficulty, or at least more and more of them spawn. And there you can see the game over screen as well. So the game is turning out really fun, and we definitely have to do some tweaks, but all of the core functionality is really there. So let me know what you want to see next, and without further ado, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And also, I really apologize for this sounding sick and everything. I know it's really annoying to listen to, but I thought it was better than not putting out a video. So yeah, thanks for watching and bye. Thank you so much to all of the awesome people who donated in September. And a special thanks to Aaron Meta, Robert Roche, James Calhoun, Kim Rose Gugos, Bao Andan Duang, and Vixian P. Thank you so much for donating. You guys are awesome. If you want to support Brackeys yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brackeys.